The silence is deafening. When I was hit by a settler, when I was assaulted in a Jewish terror attack, I didn't hear from any of, no one from the leadership of the settlement movement, those mainstream people, the politician, nobody said anything. Someone knows who is the person that hit me. I was hit by the drone of the Civil Regional Defense Force of a specific outpost called Revava. Someone knows who flew the drone. That person never came forward. The leader of the civil defense platoon never marched the person who was flying the drone to the nearest police station and told them, book him.
Welcome back to the Pluralist Podcast from both sides of the ocean. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most troubling issues that are happening these days in an already very troubling reality: the incredible rise in settler violence in the West Bank. Settler violence is not a new phenomenon, but in recent months, we're seeing a dramatic rise in the number of incidents of violence and in the number of casualties among Palestinians. Just since the war with Iran began in the last 3 weeks, 11 Palestinians have been killed. In addition, entire communities have been driven out of their homes as a result of an intentional policy of settlers backed by the government. This horrendous issue has hardly been spoken about in Israeli media, but it seems that maybe it is changing to some extent, at least when we're talking about public awareness, and we'll talk more about this today. Josh, to you.
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that we're going to be joined by Rabbi Dana Sharon, because this issue is really, I think, plaguing us. And it seems to be only getting worse, especially from here in North America. People are really looking at it and saying, what is going on? How is it that this is not only, not being prevented, but this is growing? And let me tell you, for those who care about Israel's image abroad, this is not helping. Okay, when people talk about Zionism and people talk about wanting to love and support Israel, and they see people ostensibly doing this in the name of Zionism, under their love of the land or something like this, some perversion of that, it really is a huge. I'll be gentle and diplomatic and say this is a huge turnoff. So, Donna, thank you so much for being with us. You are the head of the Rabbis Network at Rabbis for Human Rights. You were ordained by HUC's Israeli Rabbinic Program, making us colleagues here, and served as a congregational rabbi in the Reformed congregation of Gadara, right, Keilat Yuval. Of course, it should not be missed that you used to work at IRAC with Orly many years ago, and we all know, and maybe our listeners should know, that you spend countless hours in the West Bank, in Yehuda v'Shamron, Judean Samaria, whatever you want to call it. Really being a protective presence there and trying to raise a Jewish voice against the violence and against the expulsion. Dana, toda rabba, thank you so much for being with us. It's really an honor and a pleasure.
I want to ask first about you, like from your personal perspective, as a Reform rabbi, you chose to do this, right? To be actually in the field and to do this specific work. And that's kind of unique, I think. Before we dive deep into this issue, and we'll talk about it soon, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the path that led you to what you're doing, like you personally?
Of course. And of course, I'm happy to talk about my personal path. I'm also happy to note, when we're talking about Reform rabbis in general, to note that so many of the leaders, lay leaders and professional leadership in Rabbis for Human Rights are associated with the Reform movement. Because I think the Reform movement, huge tradition, background with Tikkun Olam and these values is really coming through at Rabbis for Human Rights, as well as this kind of project of, which I think is very essential to the Reform movement from the beginning, talking about universal humanistic values in Jewish language and looking within our sources those places of connection. So I think this is really showing in Rabbis for Human Rights, and I'm really happy to say that about half our members, Rabbis for Human Rights is a non-denominational organization, but yet half of our members roughly are HUC alumni. So for me, that's really significant. That's something I take huge pride in. because I think we really are
And maybe
putting our bodies where our mouths are. Yeah.
and maybe for a longer conversation, maybe for another time, but the fact the matter is that when you're talking about basic human rights, why is it that the liberal streams are so intent on that when to us it's so clear from the Torah, and
Right.
from our sources what should be
That's
said. But
right.
we can come back to that as we circle around. Yeah,
That's a whole
Whole new
PhD that
discussion. Yeah.
someone should be writing. Maybe
right.
me when the kids,
I look
get
forward
older.
to I look forward to reading
No,
that, Donna. Thank you
that's
for
a very fascinating. That's a very serious conversation to have. Also, kind of right. Why is it so obvious for Reform rabbis that we are engaged in, let's say, political causes, liberal causes? LGBTQI plus is a great example. Also, a great segue to my own personal story, because I always kind of end up saying I was an activist first and a rabbi second. And I've been working really hard. A huge part of my rabbinic path was to kind of understand how to make this one cohesive identity and professional identity and a Jewish identity with both of those things. And my biggest form of activism before becoming a rabbi, alongside I've always been very engaged in anti-occupation protest, but I was also a huge activist within the LGBTQI plus community. I was the chairperson of the Jerusalem Open House for Pride and Tolerance. This is actually how I've met Rabbi Noah Satat, who is the person who brought me into IRAC. As we've mentioned, I was with IRAC for 6 years, kind of taking that first path of being a professional activist, if we can call it that, and talking my values and incorporating Jewish language into talking about different values. And I'm super grateful for Noah and Orly for taking a chance on a fairly inexperienced person and kind of letting me really take the plunge into that world. But I think that's something that we've seen for years. My rabbinic thesis was about LGBTQI plus liturgy, and I kind of did a deep dive into the origin of Pride Shabbats, which are huge in the Reform movement in Israel. And it was very obvious that from Reform rabbis' perspective, it was very obvious. It was so much of a non-issue that we had LGBTQI plus communities in congregations that the LGBTQI plus families actually stepped up and said, hey, yeah, we're definitely tolerated, but we also want to be celebrated. And I think we've always, in the Reform movement, we've always celebrated diversity in a really big way. And we also have this deep perception of equality, be it in front of the law, which all is promoting so fearlessly for so many years, or in the eyes of the divine. Yeah, we're all equal.
Yeah, but I think, Dana, you painted really this amazing picture of the LGBTQ plus struggle, which, used to be like a huge struggle, but now it's sort of, I mean, at least in the liberal world, it's like obvious, right? And then you move to the sort of being a professional rabbi and activist in the anti-occupation situation, which is much more problematic, definitely in the Israeli society.
Right,
And it's
absolutely.
yeah. So maybe,
yes, thank you so much for
Erez.
noting that. And I think it is fascinating. Again, I'm someone's PhD, how the Israeli society is not just ignorance. It's not just ignorance, by default. It's ignorance by design. It's not just willful ignorance. It's very deliberate ignorance, and kind of almost the depoliticization of the occupation is fascinating. Someone can tell you something, and I've heard people say this, oh, I will not expose my political stance because I think it's very important that I will remain, neutral. And then they tell you, I live in Kfar Adumim. Kfar Adumim is a settlement. And
which
you
is a
see all of
political
those
step
people
anyway.
It's so political. The depoliticization of some of the settlement movement is mind-boggling. The fact that you have children in the Israeli public education system, not one that is either religious or the non-affiliated, let's say, occupation, do not know the green border exists.
Yeah.
Keren Kayemet
the
Israel.
green line
Look,
exists.
the green line exists.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Look at the maps. Get a Keren Kamat Israel map of Israel. It doesn't show the green border. Sorry, the green
Yeah,
line.
the green line. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and I think we
they
could go into
Yeah.
we could go
right,
into a conversation about like, the differentiation between different areas and what may be deemed as consensus, like I don't have any, fantasy that Ma'ale Adumim is going to be, packed up and dismantled, in any sort of agreement
right.
or Gush Etzion. But I want to, if you can, paint a picture of what's happening now over these past few weeks and months. We know that this is not a thing that just happened yesterday, or
Right.
just started. But give it for most of our listeners who may be tuning in now in the past few days, hearing this uptick. You've been on the ground, so maybe take us through and just give us a picture of what it looks like now.
So what absolutely like what I do want to say when we do the macro, when we do the wider inspection of things, it's worth noting during the judicial coup, then October 7th, then the Iran attacks. Each and every one of those notions in Israeli politics also marks an uptake in settlers' violence towards marginalized Palestinian communities, in Jewish terror attacks. And the government is just becoming more and more, as we all know, extreme, and more the police, the military forces that are on the ground are just becoming more and more politicized and extremized, and becoming less and less willing to deal with these issues, be it turning a blind eye. I was attacked in November, the beginning of November. I filed a police report the next day, November 5th. I'm looking at my calendar, it's March 24th. I still haven't heard back from the police department
And it's
to
not an
give my
exception, right? I
testimony.
mean that's
And
the
it's
rule. I
not,
mean
this
that's
is
what
the
usually
norm.
happens. Yeah. That's the norm.
And I'm an Israeli civilian who had the ability to file a police report with the police department. So many of the people who are hit, be it Palestinians or foreign civilians coming in to assist in the efforts for protective presence, will not necessarily file a complaint, because they are well aware that if they will file a complaint, they will either, in the case of the Palestinians, be held accountable and spend a night or a few in jail, or might risk deportation from Israel, as had happened with those two lovely young women, also around at the time or when I was attacked, who were deported from Israel. One of them, her mother's a rabbi. I forget her
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
And another one just last week,
Yeah.
whose
Yeah.
mother's a reform
Yeah.
rabbi, and
Right.
we're
Yeah.
following
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
closely.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. We keep throwing out these
Yeah.
lovely
Yeah.
Jewish young people. Two of them not only were deported, but are not allowed back to Israel for a decade. I'm sorry, what? It's
Yeah. It's
Israel.
yeah. Yeah.
They're
It's yeah.
Jewish.
We want
What?
yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to your personal story soon. Before that, tell us what are like the different tactics that Lassetters use to attack Palestinians. And as you said, it is not a new phenomenon, but things have evolved dramatically over the last few years and especially few months.
Right. So the first thing is worth noting is the uptake of outposts. The government is officially not, for quite a while, new outposts were rare, especially under the Bennett government. They were not allowing new outposts. Now, I'm not an expert. I can tell you what I see. And what I see is a huge increase in new outposts. Now, an outpost, a settler's outpost, a hilltop youth outpost, a Jewish terror nest, call it how you will, it can begin very modestly. They just put on, one of those mobile homes, and it's a few people. And then next thing you know, it's 4 mobile homes, and they are connecting them to the Israeli power grid, and they are offering water, and they are offering sewage, and etc. And whenever these things happen, oftentimes, even if the outpost itself is not on proper Palestinian private property, it is very close to Palestinian private property. And then the settlers use the fact that they feel unsafe to infringe on the rights of the Palestinian farmers, usually farmers, to go to their land, claiming that their land is now too close to a settlement and they are not allowed to go there unaccompanied by military forces. And this is what we usually see. This is what makes the olive harvest season so much all the more complicated. Rabbis for Human Rights have been providing protective presence for Palestinian olive farmers for roughly 30 years. It is the coolest thing we do that I wish the most we could stop doing. I wish we could all go there, do agricultural tourism, and pay $50 a day to be picking organic olives in the beautiful World Heritage terraces. It's gorgeous. It's also becoming increasingly more dangerous and unsettling to be out there because of the risk to our personal safety as well as that of the farmers. So this is the first method, this kind of indirect attack, let's say it, where you recruit local authorities, Israeli local authorities, to assist you in basically land stealing is something that we're seeing more and more. Then there are just direct attacks. A group of settlers, a group of hilltop youth will come out. They are becoming more and more dangerous, less and less, more and more bold. And they are now, thank you, Itamar Ben-Gvir, they're now armed to their teeth because they are considered to be a conflict zone or a border zone settlement or in region, which means they can get weapons very easily. So they can get
So
hot.
you're referencing
Yeah.
Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security, who of course has implemented laws which allows gun acquisition, right? That
Yeah.
people are
Ownership
able
and
to obtain
acquisition, right?
Yes.
ownership of arms just
Yeah.
by being in a specific conflict
Yeah.
areas, and because we're seeing some of the weapons being used, they're
Right.
not, they're actually army issued, right? Is what you're saying. But Donna,
Yes.
take us back a second and explain to us, because when we read about this, and especially in the mainstream and the media and the government, people often say these are a few, extremists or a few lone wolves, or in Hebrew we call them wild weeds
Yeah.
that are just growing. Help us understand, who are these, I don't know if you want to call them gangs or, groups of, whether they're hilltop youth or other settlers. Not all of them are youth. And just so we can understand, who we're talking about here.
So that's a very interesting, intricate question, because for some of them, they are in fact, at-risk youth that is being radicalized by specific extreme forces within the settlement movement, within the Jewish Messianic movement. It's a little heartbreaking. Some of those outposts, some of the most extreme ones, are constituted by the Israeli government rehabilitation facilities. The government is sending those young children that were extracted from their homes fully to be rehabilitated by some very extreme forces. And their rehabilitation includes mostly picking on Palestinian farmers and Palestinian shepherding communities and stealing flock. So I don't see how that's helping anyone.
And
So
who are,
that's another way that this
yeah.
government is failing everyone miserably.
And Dana, who is first of all, who is backing them, and also what is the attitude of the sort of leadership mainstream, if we can say so, leadership of the settlers, right? Because obviously
Right.
not everybody agrees with them, but we know that most
Right,
people
but the
don't speak up against
silence
them.
is deafening. The silence is deafening. When I was hit by a settler, when I was assaulted in a Jewish terror attack, I didn't hear from any of, no one from the leadership of the settlement movement, those mainstream people, the politician, nobody said anything. Someone knows who is the person that hit me. I was hit by the drone of the civil regional attack, the civil regional defense force of a specific outpost called Revava. Someone knows who flew the drone. That person never came forward. the leader of the civil defense of the platoon never marched the person who was flying the drone to the nearest police station and told them, book him.
And
The
he was
silence and the
wearing,
ignorance, they were
and he, yeah,
right.
Dana,
So
wearing IDF
in
uniform,
the
right?
so there are two things. The day I was hit, two really bad things had happened. One of them is when I was attacked by a drone, a military issued drone, definitely a military issued drone, very big, very obviously military issued, that hit my arm. I needed stitches. And when two apparently
IDF.
they were reservists, came to retrieve the drone, they shot at us to retrieve the drone. We're not sure. It is very possible that these are two incidents we're talking about. One is a drone assault, and the other one is opening fire at civilian, not according to Army protocol. Two very serious offenses. On both of them, no one was still brought to justice.
And can you explain to us what is the army doing in this instance and what is the police, right? Because sometimes the soldiers are there, right? It's in front of their eyes.
Right. And when you're in the sea territory, then the army's police, basically. The sea territories, even civilian matters are supposed to be resolved by the army, because there is no police there. It's not in the authority of the Palestinian police. It's also not in the authority of the Israeli police. It's border patrol is basically in charge. And that's also awful because they are not trained to do police work. Being a police person and being a soldier, it's two very different professions. And the fact that we have, these young soldiers having to deal with what is essentially police work is very troubling and very damaging, both for those soldiers, but also for their ability to actually get the work done efficiently and appropriately.
My sense is that they are somewhat confused as to who they're meant to be protecting and who they're meant to be, reprimanding, or who they're meant to be.
That's a very nice way of putting that, because they are not confused. They're on the side of Jewish people. It doesn't matter
Yes.
who is the offender.
And
it doesn't
especially,
matter.
I think,
And we've seen this repeatedly, especially under Ben Gvir and the new military, the new person who's in charge on the Yehuda v'Shomron military region, who is a settler.
Yeah. So
Right. Okay. So let's give a basic. Sorry. No. I want to make sure that we're not getting too far into the weeds, because I want to give a sort of a larger overview, right? In terms of, you painted a picture of who some of these settlers are. What is their goal? What do you think that they hope to do by committing, acts of violence, running through? I think we heard this week that there is a really coordinated attempt to ransack, I think what we would call in Jewish history, we would call pogroms, right? Going through Palestinian villages and torching cars and houses. And what's their goal? What are they trying to achieve by this? Just so we understand the larger picture here.
So the larger attempt is to make the entire region of Yehuda v'Shomron, or the Palestinian occupied territories, free from Palestinian population and take over it completely. And to some extent, it's working. We are seeing some things that can be described as ethnic cleansing and de facto annexation, where they just take over larger and larger quantity of ground. Grazing is a very interesting method. A Jewish settler will get a flock of goats and decide that they have grazing rights over a specific region of the Jordan Valley that has been used by the same Palestinian community for years and years, for like generations. And they would call the local authorities, and they will call their the Rav Shatz, the person who's in charge on the civil defense forces, and they will of course side with the settlers, and the Palestinians will end up in jail in a good case and dead in a bad case. And the increase in violence is very, very real, very, very scary. Public attention is very distracted by the situation with Iran. It makes all the sense. However, it feels like every time these things gain momentum in Israeli press, something else kind of happened and the public attention goes away again.
So I want to ask you, Dana, about the public response and public awareness. I completely agree that people, like most Israelis, are not aware at all about what's going on in the West Bank. They don't want to know. And as you said, deliberately, obviously, the education system does not teach anybody anything about that. But I do think that because of the severity of the case, especially in the recent weeks, it seems to me that some things have changed, at least in the sense that we hear a little bit more about this in Israeli media, and not only in Haaretz, but also in other media outlets. And I think this in and of itself is important, right? Because obviously you need first for Israelis to hear what's happening. So I want to ask you whether you do feel there is, obviously it's under the war and everybody, is super, sort of surviving, right? In survival mode, but still I think it's more talked about than before. So do you think it's going to maybe make some change, at least in the public awareness, in the fact that more like journalists are talking about it?
I mean, I hope so. I really do. But I think we keep seeing these peaks of interest and then they dwindle into nothing. And we've seen it. We've seen it when in the week I was hurt, 2 people were deported. And then after I was hurt, also Professor Oded Daya was also very severely hurt. And we've, it got some nice media coverage, but at the end of the day, we haven't seen a meaningful change. So I really would like to hope so. I think we are in dire need of a change. Like Josh said, honestly, yes, the optics of this is terrible, but the essence of this is even worse. The complete lack of accountability, the complete lack of, it's a lawless land. It's the West Bank. It's the Wild West.
It's the Wild West, right? It's
the Wild West. And what I think, from a very kind of utilitarian point of view, we should know by now that everything that starts in the West Bank ends up in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. That all of those
that was
things
interesting.
we see.
I think our friend and colleague and leader MK Rabbi Gilad Kariv, asked that question in a Knesset committee the other day to say, okay, right now everyone is just sort of turning a blind eye or not paying attention to this, and it's a whole interesting question about how much this is covered in the news right now, especially with Iran. And Don, I think you would make the contention that this is being done deliberately while the country is distracted, and rightfully so, as missiles are falling on Tel Aviv and in the south and all of those. But Gilad raised the question of, when is this going to spill over into, mainstream cities and towns and villages, throughout Israel. But
Josh, I want to say another thing about this point. I think even on a broader sense, I think you mentioned the judicial coup. I think that during the judicial coup, Israelis understood that this mode of lawlessness, right, that exists in the West Bank penetrated Israel through the government, right? I mean, the fact that the government is trying to destroy the judicial system is a direct result of how they are used to, deal with law or the lack of law or the lack of the rule of law in the West Bank. And I think during this time in 2023, people started to connect the dots. And I think it was an important process for Israelis to understand. Obviously, everything is stopped on October 7th, but I think people sort of understood this idea of spilling in Israel. And we saw it, by the way, on how the government is not treating at all violence within Arab cities within Israel, but we saw some, sort of very strict or cruel policy by the police toward Arab villages within Israel as sort of a way to deal with Arab violence. We saw it in the south after there were a few cars were put on fire in southern Israel, and then as a result, blockade was put on an Arab village within Israel. And those tactics were used to be used only in the West Bank. Now they have brought inside, and that's how Palestinian citizens of Israel are being treated, right? Blocked within their own village, not allowed to actually go out on a complete, So this is definitely spilling in already.
Precisely. The uptake in racism and in racist incidents is not my topic to talk about. That's for you, Orly. And it is all of those notions. Dehumanization does not stop at borders. When you stop treating people like they're people, then you stop treating people like they're people. And your own people to some extent. And we see it, we've Reform rabbis in Israel are kind of accustomed to being marginalized. We know how dangerous these things are. And when you disenfranchise people, okay, so now they're annexing Palestinian private property. I don't know, maybe next they'll annex Hebrew College because we don't deserve property because we're not Jewish enough. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's kind of the notion. The notion is that with human rights, there's right and wrong.
So Donna, I think we're getting the picture of what is happening. Tell us a little bit about what your approach is as Rabbis for Human Rights, as an organization, into what can be done. Because when I raised the topic here in North America, and we just had a pretty large rabbis convention with, when people want to talk about Israel and their really focuses on Iran and standing in solidarity. And I even got comments from people saying, really, you're worried about poor Palestinians in the West Bank when missiles are falling on Israel and our people are suffering and in and out of shelters. And, these are two separate questions, but,
Right.
help me understand what the response should be for that. And then take us through a little bit about, whether it's a theory of change or just a emergency response to what's going on right now, and how these things should be prevented.
Okay, so first of all, I think these two don't eliminate each other. The fact that people are in and out of bomb shelters here doesn't eliminate the fact that our Palestinian community is under attack. Some may
Yeah, they're not mutually
argue
exclusive,
it's
right?
right. Both things can be true at the same time. And some may
There is
argue they're all
yeah.
policies of, very callous government who's very indifferent to human lives and the sanctity of lives. Some may refer to some of them as Death Eaters, and that makes sense to me. Look, what Rabbis for Human Rights have been doing, Rabbis for Human Rights have been, again, providing protective presence with the understanding that it doesn't look like when Rabbis for Human Rights was founded in 1988, I think. It did look like the occupation's about to end any minute now, and we're heading in a good direction. We just need to stick it out a little longer. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We still provide protective presence. Our work is done with two perspectives in mind. One, to actually aid and abet those struggling communities. Secondly, to remind both our Palestinian partners and ourselves that we can do better and that we are better and that we have these values and we stand by them. And since October 7th, we've also been providing humanitarian aid to some extent. It's something we didn't engage with, but the complete lockdown that has been put upon the West Bank since October 7th with very few uplifts have basically brought a lot of people people who are already struggling are now struggling even harder. So we thought some humanitarian aid of food and of medicine is something that is this very basic human thing we can do. And we are doing that, especially we've just ended our Ramadan campaign with great success, where we've been providing food packages to specifically struggling communities with specific Ramadan supply. So that's something we've been doing. We also try to educate within the Israeli society with the pre-military academies mostly. And of course, with rabbis as agents of change for their communities and congregations. We have over 170 members, not cross denominations, cross genders, across the country, all of whom are committed to both being rabbis and dedicated to the issues of human rights and the infringements upon them.
I think, Dana, first of all, it's amazing. And I think it's such an essential work, which always has been, and especially now. And I think one of the unique aspects, of course, is that it's being done from a Jewish perspective. And I think this is obviously something that we at IRAC and the IMPJ are very busy doing, actually telling the Israeli public what the government is trying to present as Jewish is not our Judaism, and our Judaism believe in the sanctity of life, as you said, and in the need to help others. And actually just, we have been issuing public statements on this, and we just issued a public statement of the IMPJ and of Maram, the Council of Reform Rabbis in Israel, about the need to deal with settler violence and about the fact that, of course, we cannot stay silent, and rather Judaism demands us to speak up against violence and against, and of course, not to turn a blind eye. And we called both on the government and the police and the IDF and the settler leadership and the media to deal with it and to expose it and to the Israeli public as a whole, not to turn a blind eye. And I think it's important to have more and more voices actually talk about this. And we do hear, to some extent, some moderate Orthodox voices, right? Rabbis who are speaking up against this. And I think this is important. So maybe just say a word about that.
Yeah, I saw three in the last week, right? Rabbi Shaul and Avidan Friedman and even Rabbi Ken Brander, who are mainstream in the Gush Etzion.
Calling Avidan mainstream is a bit of a stretch.
Okay,
no,
he's a little bit
he's
further
a
to the left,
wonderful person and a dedicated member and a friend.
We wish he would be mainstream.
He was more mainstream.
He's so amazing. I wish he would be more mainstream.
Fair enough, right? We're not hearing more mainstream people because I think that there are settlers or those who live in Jewish communities beyond the Green Line who want to live in peace and want to live quietly and have relationships and also condemn this kind of violence. And why are we not hearing more of an uproar from them? Take us through that a little bit.
No, that's a very good question. I'm a little, I can offer some answers. I do have to kind of say it's not necessarily my realm of expertise. I'm a Reform rabbi. That's where I come from. It is important for me also to note, if we're talking about Rabbis for Human Rights, all of our members have to be Israelis. We take that also very seriously, that it's not, Josh, you're one of the exceptions, because exceptions of someone who was ordained in Israel maintains a very strong connection to Israel and doesn't serve in Israel at the moment. That's one of our very few exceptions. But we take very, very seriously the fact that we're not only offering a Jewish perspective, but a Jewish Israeli perspective. Because it's very easy to kind of, say, oh, okay, it's American liberals, what do they know? No, we are all here on the ground. We all have the highest of stakes in this situation, with children serving in the military, with children going into bomb shelters. We were in it. So I think that's important.
That's critically important. That's
why why we're not hearing more of an uproar from the Orthodoxy mainstream or even more modern Orthodoxy, I think is very, very I think it's critical that we will start hearing more of those voices. Again, I think the government did a really, really good job with equating caring about human rights with leftism, with liberalism, with all these values who I think are important and beautiful, but can be challenging for the Orthodoxy, for the mainstream. And I think people are genuinely, if they are employed by the government, which is much more common within the Orthodox streams to be actually governmental employee, then that's another issue where you cannot speak up necessarily. And even the people who don't, I think they're much more intertwined with the government or with semi-governmental entities. And again, Keren HaKayemet is a good example of a semi-governmental entity that is very complicated, and Rabbis for Human Rights have called them out on several of the things that they have done, and is a founding body for a lot of also wonderful things. So it's very
we know that we have our representative within the JNF that are aware of this and are doing
are working.
They're trying to do a lot,
incredible
within those
trying to do a lot within those institutions, and it's so important. And that's another question, I think, if we're talking about how we are impacting things, those who try to change from within and those who try to change from without. and those who are, trying to, from within the Knesset, from within Khan, while some of us are standing, outside and are just kind of doing a different kind of work. And I think it's all of those attempts are imperative to try
Yeah.
and make
Yeah.
things better at the end of the day.
And I think, and I think talking about how to make an impact, Josh, maybe you can say a word about what you're doing from North America, because this is, you're focusing on this now as one of the
Well,
important issues.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. There is a bill in Congress called the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, which is essentially a bill, mostly by Democrats who are looking to, really raise the voice to say that this is unacceptable. And as Israel is a recipient of, significant foreign aid from the United States, that this can't continue. Now, we remember in the Biden administration that there were sanctions,
Yeah, which
leveled
were immensely
on,
helpful. We have
uh, you
seen
know,
have seen
there
a
was.
decrease under the sanctions.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
sure. Sanctions have been removed under President Trump right now. Actually, Donna, can you help us understand how that worked and what was helpful about that? And because lots of people here are a little bit hesitant to, you know, support a bill that deals with issues that appear to be domestic issues for a different country right now, even though we think that, this is dire and this is, incredibly serious. Just tell us how it works and how it's impactful.
So right. So once you have, as it's first of all, it's worth noting, like you said, that there's a lot of foreign aid. It's also worth noting that there's a lot of private American money funding these settlements. A lot of them, by the way, from evangelical Christians. The evangelical Christians are pouring buckets of money into the settlement movement, presumably trying to head rush the Armageddon, but I'm not, again, not an expert. We are fully aware that there are some serious connections there. So and for example, different NGOs that are buying properties, Palestinian properties in East Jerusalem, for example, are also presumably being funded by similar bodies. It's very hard to understand, and for some of them, people have dedicated a lot of research. I think even IRAC that try and dedicated a lot of research to understand who's bankrolling some of these things, to no avail, because it's so covert. And I think it is important to note that, if there is governmental tax dollars going into Israel, going into Israeli defense, make sure and this is something I think we're trying to encourage Israelis as well. Make sure you know where your tax dollars are going. Make sure you know what is done in your behalf with your money. Is it public library? Is it, the Iron Dome, which are great things? Or are you helping arming civil defense forces in the settlements and enabling governmental military weapons issuing to people who probably shouldn't be carrying firearms in the situations where they probably shouldn't be carrying firearms? And I think I think it is your prerogative and your right and almost your duty as citizens in a democratic country, or somewhat democratic countries at this point, to kind of know what's going on, know where our money is going. The Israeli taxpayers are paying incredibly high taxes. I am fully aware what my taxes are being used to do, and I fully hate it. Most of it. Very little of it I'm willing to stand behind.
Yeah.
Well, that's important. And of course, we don't get like an itemized bill with our taxes to
Right.
say, X
Unfortunately, we
percentage
should
went to these things.
we
No one
should really
does.
try and push
And
for
we as
it.
Yeah, yeah. And we as a reform movement have also, not we actually are quite against conditioning foreign aid or restricting foreign aid in any way, especially when Israel's under attack. So, but just help us understand what happens when the U.S., for instance, levels sanctions on on a settler person. How does that curb their activity?
First of all, the awareness is important. When all of a sudden there is this, even a news coverage saying this and that person is actually sanctioned by the US government, that's important. it also uses, sometimes it was used as leverage for our government, for the Israeli police to start, at least to some extent, investigate some of those very questionable people, very questionable actions, getting sometimes very questionable funding.
If I remember correctly, when we had the sanctions, both American and I think it was British and others, on people such as Benzi Gupshtin, who is the head of Lehava, and others, Israeli banks could not, have them, open accounts. Their credit cards were canceled. They couldn't use different platforms, for instance, to, get, donations. It really, really restricted the way they can operate and do fundraising. Tremendously important in curbing their activities. So I think it's
So it
definitely
makes a huge difference,
a
right? It
huge,
really
yeah.
impacts them.
Yeah,
It's
a
really,
Yeah.
huge
really, it
difference.
really, really matters. And when we're talking about sort of international sanctions, then Israeli banks need to adhere to this, and it really could make a difference in helping to curb their activity and to minimize the damage that they're doing. So definitely those sanctions made a difference, tremendous difference. I want to say that, yeah, we at IRAC made sure that all the banks really, respect all those sanctions when they were in effect, to make sure that actually, they are not allowed to spread their hatred and to do whatever, they're doing on all these
From a legal
platforms.
point of view.
Yeah, including,
Yeah.
writing to Twitter and writing to all of those, platforms, to actually deplatform them and not allowing them to spread all the hatreds and to restrict their activities as much as possible.
So Donna, earlier you referred to this and the attack that you were a victim of this past November while helping with the olive harvest. You referred to it as you were a victim of Jewish terror. What is preventing the Defense Ministry right now from classifying these acts as actually acts of terror? They have no problem any Palestinian that throws a rock or has a scissors in their hand as they attack a border patrol, which is really terrible, obviously, and those are definitely acts of terror, whether it's whether it's October 7th or whether it's a stone throwing, really. But these are these militias, as we're seeing in the West Bank, are terrorizing villages. So do they have the actual legal distinction of being terror groups? And if not, what is preventing the Defense Ministry from classifying them as such?
They do not, though we've been negotiating for this for how long, Orly?
Decades. Yeah.
I
Yeah. And
remember
obviously the power
posting a
is
lot
within,
about
as you say,
this
the defense.
on social media.
Yeah. When working in IRAC. Basically, the power to declare a terrorist organization lies with the defense minister. And obviously, under this government, this is not going to happen. And not only that, the IDF, the police used to use administrative detention toward Jewish terrorists. Now, this is a tool that is undemocratic whatsoever, right? But despite that, it's being used toward Palestinian terrorists, which means they're being put to jail without having any legal proceedings. I mean, they're not being charged in a sort of regular legal proceeding, but it's sort of an expedited procedure where they're actually put to jail without a real trial. And it has been used against Palestinian terrorists in the West Bank for years, and then it has began to be used against Jewish terrorists, but then under the current government, the current defense ministry stopped it. And that was an important tool that actually the security forces told the defense ministry, we need it. We need it in order to use to fight Jewish terrorism, but this has not been used. And obviously this is another tool that has not been used because it's not the policy of this government that actually backs these actions. And this is just another sign showing that they have no intention whatsoever of actually dealing with this terrible, terrible phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that a little bit because I think when we're seeing an uptick, it's partially because of this backing from the government. And we know that Itamar Ben-Gvir, in charge of the police and giving access to weapons, but also Bezalel Smotrich, who many may not be aware, in addition to being finance minister, also has a like 1 day a week position as the deputy minister in the defense ministry in charge of activities in the territories. So how is the government supporting this? And what should people know about how this has changed or morphed in the last, couple of years?
So, right. So, like we've said, from it's important to note that for decades, the Israeli government was turning a blind eye, definitely not enforcing enough. Now we're in the point of almost open endorsement. So many members of the government actually live in the occupied territories. Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, I think, lives in Kiryat Arba. They're within it, and they encourage it by actions, by words, by Limosun HaMelech, raising funds to for the legal representation of the person. Right, I think so. Excuse me, I forget the
She's
parties.
she's in Ben-Gvir's party.
Okay, and Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, surprisingly, it's not the same party. But yeah, we are seeing both in rhetorics and in actions full endorsement of the government with very, very little opposition, be it from the more moderate members of the government to even parties who are technically in the opposition. The fact that I can name the names of the people who are speaking up against this, Rabbi MK Gilad Kariv and MK Naama Lazimi, I can name them. That is not okay. I shouldn't be able to name them.
That they're in such a minority, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It should be so obvious that whenever there is a Jewish terror attack, Benny Gantz is making a statement against it, as well as Yair Lapid. We are hearing nothing almost from them. We've heard very little on the attacks on Palestinian citizens of Israel in very specific contexts, but not near enough, especially with how severe and how encompassing the phenomenon is. That is so disappointing.
Yeah, completely. And we could talk about this for hours more, but unfortunately, we are nearing the end of this episode. And Dana, first of all, thank you for this really, really important and very bleak picture of how things are, because that's, how things are. And I want to ask you sort of in conclusion, two things. First of all, what do you think our listeners can do if they care about this? And the second one is, in this really, really, really such a difficult reality, where do you find hope? Those two very easy questions.
No, because the whole part is easy. I have
Okay.
amazing partners. We have amazing partners. We are amazing partners to each other. I know when we need something, when we need partners in hope, IRAC is usually my first call. And you always pick up the phone, and we're hopefully, in God's will, we were all going to be marching together in the Interfaith March this May, taking this so important stance on what Jerusalem should and could look like. It's actually one of our most incredible projects we haven't talked about.
Yeah, maybe we should just a word. It's a march that Rabbi for Human Rights initiate and lead every Jerusalem Day, sort of as a response to the racist flag march that marches through the Muslim quarter in the Old City. And it's an interfaith march for human rights, for tolerance, and for peace. And we always take part in it. And it's a very, very moving and powerful event every spring in Jerusalem.
Right. So I forget if it's my 19 or 18. We'll check and we will circle back to the listeners. But it's a really, really meaningful, powerful thing to do, which I encourage everyone to if you're in Israel, Palestine, come join us. If you're not, see how you can contribute and how you can support us in empowering both those moderate and pluralistic religious voices, both within Judaism and without, with the different faiths, whom all of us share this passion of making this country, especially Jerusalem, a better place, more enlightened and more accepting and beautiful. So that's really the hope for me is easy. Every time we've done a fundraiser, a public fundraiser in the last 2 or 3 years. Not only did we raise everything we hoped for, we raised much more. And so many of our donors are Israelis. There are a lot of people in this country who are fully aware of how bad things are. And I think we're really trying hard. And I think we have beautiful, smart, intelligent, inspiring leadership. Orly, I'm including you, and I'm including Gilad and Rabbi Noah and Rabbi Avi. I'm from some extent, I've been really lucky to have all of these really incredible mentors throughout my career so far. That's the hope part. And I think we also touched on what you can do, right? What we always say, what I used to say in IRAC, and I still say now, find your non-governmental in Israel and get involved. Find a non-governmental organization that stands by something you believe in. Don't touch anything that is governmental. This government is toxic. Steer clear from it, but find a non-governmental organization doing the really important work non-governmental organizations here do right now, and get behind them. Show your support, be it via funding, positive feedback on social media, sending an encouraging email. I used to get those when I was doing IRAC. It was really fun sometimes. Yeah, and get yourself informed and get yourself involved through those means.
And of course, from here, support our efforts in passing the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, because that can have a real impact. And it is something that we can do. And we have action alerts going out and around it. And I think, Donna, what you said about two things can be true at the same time, that we want to stand in solidarity and support with all those who are like all of you who are running in and out of shelters. And of course, our hearts go out to those who really are suffering, including people from our movement. And that doesn't have to contradict or supersede the fact that this is a really, really dire and only growing issue that, especially when, leading into Pesach, as we're thinking about this holiday of freedom and liberation and what we can do.
And Josh, I really want to relate to what you said, because I think it's not a competition of pain. We have a lot of pain going on, and we should
Yes.
we should be aware of all of it and try to do whatever we can to address it.
One of our Palestinian partners, Omar Harami, who works with us on the Interfaith March every year, he always says, it's not the pain Olympics. We are not in competition.
Yes, with the Victim Olympics, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
For
plenty
everyone.
of pain to go around, and let's try and combat that well we can and make things. None of us, there is a beautiful, beautiful prayer, usually connected to Pride Month, but I like to use it also for Pesach. And the concluding was, give us the wisdom to know that none of us is free until we all are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dana, for all the work you do. We'll continue to work together for a better future, and for coming here and sharing this really important things with us. And I want to remind our listeners that this podcast exists because we believe Israel can be better for all who live here and for all who love it from afar. But that takes honest conversation, and it takes partnership. So if these episodes mean something to you, please share it and help us keep going.
To stay up to date, subscribe on Riverside, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please help us grow. Leave a 5-star review and send this episode to someone who could be part of this conversation. If you want to even sponsor an episode, it's a great way to mark an upcoming occasion, maybe in honor of Pesach. We'd like to sponsor this episode, or a birthday, or an anniversary, or even Yom Ha'atzmaut. We'd love to hear from you. If always there's a topic you would like us to explore, please reach out, or if there's something that you think that we should be addressing. And as you go to leave your review, you could say something like, hey, I was really confused about this settler violence issue, but now I'm not. And now I really understand with moral clarity what should be done. That's an easy review to leave. And we hope that you continue to listen and to spread the Pluralist Podcast. Our deep thanks to Rabbi Dana Sharon and to Orly Erez-Likhovski as ever. I'm Rabbi Josh Weinberg, and we look forward to connecting soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.